In this video, I'm going to be talking about how I made this solid sculpture. So, to start off, this sculpture started in the shower, weirdly enough. I had this thought inside the shower of I wanted to make a woman. My idea was initially I wanted to make a woman with birds pecking at the woman's face. And that changed up a little bit as I sculpted. I found it would have been a lot cooler if I put the birds inside the human head, inside the woman's head. And that's kind of what I went with, and you'll see I just kind of experimented, and you'll see later I just tried to position the bird and the woman once I made both, and I just tried to see, what positioning I liked, what kind of composition I was going to go for while I was sculpting. I don't really do too much planning except like, a simple sketch, because I've done a sketch of this sculpture that I wanted to do, but I changed it up as I was sculpting. So, the reason I'm doing this is purely out of ambition to get better at the human anatomy. So, the human skull is a difficult one to challenge, and I'm challenging myself to learn the anatomy of the human head. I don't think I'm even close to learning all there is to learn about anatomy. I'm not even at the tip of the iceberg on the human face. I could definitely be better at the anatomy of the human head, and even figure drawing too. I don't do much figure drawing, I don't really analyze anatomy as much as I should, but I can, because as a sculptor I should know the muscles of the face. But I just look at a reference and I try to sculpt as closely as I see of the reference, and that did work for me in this sculpture, I think. But I'm sure a year from now I'll look at the sculpture and say, what was I thinking? The nose is too big, or the eyes are too big, or I'll look back on it. But that's how I have improve as an artist. So I started off, and yeah, here you can see I'm cutting off the start of my sculpture. So I started with the Loomis method, and I just made a ball, and then I added kind of like the Loomis method kind of looks like there's a mask on top of a ball, and then like the sphere of your head, and the sphere is the base, and then you add the mask, and then you add the facial features, and then blah blah blah, and that's the basics of the Loomis method. But when I made it, the sculpture just wasn't looking good. It was very uneven on the new armature that I got. Also, this new armature I got for Christmas. Big thanks to my parents. They bought me this armature for Christmas, which is going to be super useful for these head sculptures. In the past, I did head sculptures, or human head sculptures, and it was like on a makeshift armature, and all the clay fell off, and it was just like such a crappy setup that you might as well just invest the $40. But I got it as a gift. So it's working great. It worked really well for the sculpture. But then I restarted. After I failed that first attempt, I restarted and didn't give up. And I made the sculpture slightly smaller, just because I was a little low on clay, and I wanted to make sure I had enough, and I had plenty too. So I made the sculpture just it's a tiny bit smaller, and I learned from my first mistake, which is why I wanted to make this sculpture in the first place. Just wanted to learn sculpting humans better, more accurately, and it always starts off really rough, and it looks awful at first, but you got to push through that ugly phase and just keep adding and subtracting clay until you get a happy medium of results. I was pretty happy with the jawline here. I'm not sure. I'll probably look back, a year and be like, oh, that doesn't look good. And I could have changed this, I could have changed that, but I'm pretty happy with the way it looked now. And I just sculpted the woman, and I had the shower thought, this is where the sculpture came from. I had the thought of a woman with the birds pecking her face, but then I changed it up, and so I started off with just the woman, and I started off with just sculpting the woman head, and then I didn't stop there. I sculpted a bird, and all of this is sculpted solid as well too. So what I do is I sculpt this completely solid, and of course you can't fire the clay when it's solid like this inside the kiln. It would just explode, and it would just crack, and so I have to carve it out. But I'm sculpting everything very rough and very solid with some soft clay, and then once it firmed up a little bit, you'll see later that I sliced the woman's head right in half, and that was after I attached the bird and the wings of the bird going through the woman. I cut it in half and I carved it all out. So I'm doing this sculpture, just for fun, and it was a lot of fun. It did take me, actually it's a pretty quick one. This sculpture took me maybe 4 or 5 days to complete, and that sounds really quick, but I mean complete the sculpture, and then I had to do maybe 3 more additional days to add details. So it was easy to complete the foundation of this sculpture, but that's what really matters too. That's what takes the most time, is the foundation, because if the anatomy is off, or if the positioning of the head is off, it's not going to get fixed later, because I'm just going to add details, and can't really change the position of the head. That's why I had to restart on the last first attempt I made of this sculpture. That's why I had to restart, because if I'm not happy with that, I'm not going to be happy with the rest of the sculpture. So Yeah, I definitely think I learned a lot inside this sculpture with the anatomy. I'm definitely going to keep sculpting more human heads just for fun. I'm not in any sort of school or class right now, so I'm just doing this all for fun and, just documenting it here, and might as well, post it on YouTube and see what comes out of it. Hopefully I can inspire, my audience or someone watching this video to do the same, just to keep pushing their, challenging themselves as an artist, I guess. So I do have another idea too for another human sculpture that I probably will be doing in the near future, and this one was a lot of fun. So one thing I did want to mention about the woman sculpture. So I did not add irises. I initially cut them out of the head, but I didn't add irises on the sculpture just because when I did cut the hole for the eyes, it just looked so off, and I never really went back to the eyes to redefine the irises and to fix it. And so I just kind of kept it like a blank stare kind of statue look, and I kind of like it. It doesn't really show much personality in the woman because eyes are everything, I think, in a human head. But I think that's a good thing. I kind of like the way that you as a viewer can put yourself in her shoes, I guess. I don't know. It's kind of weird, and you can let me know what you think. But I kind of like that there's no iris on the sculpture. Maybe I'll paint it in later, or glaze it in later. But I'm not quite sure. And then here I'm just playing around with where I'm positioning the bird and the wings. So I initially, like I said, wanted the birds pecking her face, and then I was going to put it like right next to her cheek and have her cheek like stretching out onto the bird's beak. And but then I changed that up. I thought it would be cooler if the wing was going through her head and there was birds like flying through her face. Now, if you know of a sculpture that is like this idea, a lot of the time my ideas come from other things I've seen in the past unintentionally, like completely unintentionally. I have had sculptures in the past where I've started them and realized, they exist on, they've existed for years and years now. Like I had an idea of taking an old-fashioned sculpture and putting like bubblegum in its mouth. I think it was the statue of David, and from Michelangelo, and I was like, oh, I should put bubblegum in his mouth. Well, if you look that up on Etsy, it's right there. And I didn't want to create something that you could buy on Etsy, so 3D printed, so that doesn't make any sense to me. I decided to just go with a different idea. But whenever I tried to do my research for the sculpture, I tried to look up like woman with birds flying through her, but I couldn't find anything. Like I don't know. Maybe this is an idea that just popped out of my head randomly and hasn't been inspired by another sculpture I've already seen, but highly unlikely. I think I've been inspired by some statue or sculpture because I can't really fully recognize this idea, but I don't know, because sometimes my sculptures come out from inspirations of things I don't remember, what I'm inspired by. I know it sounds so whack and weird, but that's I'm wondering about this sculpture if I got inspired by something in a museum I saw and I just didn't know, but I don't know. So this is what the sculpture looked like, just everything really roughly thrown onto the sculpture. Obviously everything's slipped and scored, but it's not refined, no detail. Nothing's smoothed out, nothing's perfect. And so this is where I had to cut the sculpture in half. You don't want to add details before you cut the sculpture in half. I've learned that the hard way in the past. For my astronaut head, I added a lot of detail to the astronaut head, and then I cut it in half, and then I went to go reassemble it, and it was all ruined. Like all the details were ruined because, well, I cut it in half and I maneuvered it so much that it misshapen the forehead. It shaped the mouth weird and eyes weird. So what I've learned is don't add details until you cut it in half and reassemble it. That worked well for me because after I cut it in half, I added a lot more details that made me pretty happy with the hair, and then the birds as well. The wings were a little thick when I cut it in half because I didn't want them snapping or drying out too fast, so I kept them a little thicker intentionally until I carved it all out. Another thing with this armature is it's only like $40, so if you ever do one of these sculptures, definitely get this armature. I think I got it on like blick.com. My parents did when they bought me for Christmas, so it was really cheap. It's really quality tool you want to have if you're ever doing a human head sculpture. But yeah, so this human head armature, when I cut through it, I hit the armature, so it made the cut a little bit more messy. Just make sure you if you ever do one of these sculptures, make sure you're cutting your sculpture at a good place. So I cut it so I wasn't cutting the eyes in half. I wanted to make sure I wasn't cutting the feathers in half from the bird, and I wanted to make sure it was a clean enough separation to where I can reattach it cleanly and not have too much cleanup after I assembled it. So yeah, I had to cut 2 cuts, one for the forehead horizontally, and one vertical to get the entire top half of her like scalp, I guess you could say, off of the rest of the sculpture. And then I had to reassemble, and I added clay on the seams, and then slipped and scored a bunch, and just kept refining and adding details. And this was the time to go crazy with details. This is the time where it's not going to get ruined now. I can smooth out the skin, I can make a texture for the feathers, and I'm pretty happy with the way the hair came out as well. So tell me what you think of this sculpture in the comments, and what you think of, what do you think anatomy? What do you think of the birds? What do you think of the idea? So I would love to hear your anyone's thoughts and ideas. I'm definitely gonna be continuing more sculptures in the future. I have a bunch more ideas, and I'm just having a lot of fun sculpting. So because I have the time right now, so it's been a lot of fun. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope it inspired you in some way. I will see you in the next one.